Welcome to the Sports Trading Card Hall of Fame. Today I'm going to be introducing Chapter 16, which is a chapter, a little heavier chapter, where this chapter is basically kind of upper deck themed. It's inadvertent that I found myself doing this. Basically, there were four stories for me to talk. Three stories of cardboard, and then one example I'm elevating to the Binder of Fame. And the three stories of cardboard all ended up being about basketball or about Upper Deck, and so I just figured, hey, let's round it all out. So it's basically kind of like an ode to Upper Deck in a way. The stories of cardboard I'm talking about are the importance of Tiger Woods, which doesn't sound like it's about Upper Deck, but it very much is. The 1992-93 Upper Deck card number 1 Shaquille O'Neal rookie card trade or exchange card. And then the third one that I'm talking about is Upper Deck's Heroes sets, baseball heroes, football heroes, those sets. But I want to start off by taking the story of box bottoms and elevating this to the Binder of Fame. Box bottoms is a wonderful part of the tradition of sports cards related to kids. Because as kids, we don't have a lot of money and we always want to find something special and exciting and new, something that we feel like the other kids, the older kids, the adults, that they all have the opportunity to have and collect, and we can't quite get it, but we love to find ways to be able to get some of these things. And box bottoms, I can tell you from experience, very much fit that, because most collectors didn't even really know that box bottoms existed. Even if they, for many of them, even if they did, they only kind of knew. It just wasn't that big of a deal because it was throwaway stuff. It wasn't the main stuff we were collecting, which means for those of us who did care about box bottoms, it was like a hidden secret. We were the ones who were lucky enough to actually care and take advantage of it. Most box bottoms were thrown away. It's a shame, but that's just kind of the way that it worked. It was really important to be happening during the junk wax era because as the card collecting world was getting bigger and more difficult to keep track of, there were hidden things all over the place that were so much fun to find, to discover, and to engage with. And to have something that was not in a linear fashion, something that was truly made to be unique, right under the nose of everything that was straightforward, just made things so much more exciting. But also the accessibility was great because it was still about collecting for kids. And since most kids don't really have a lot of money, you're trying to figure out how to stretch what you have a little bit further. And so it gave, among other things, the opportunity for you to develop a relationship with the card shop owner to try to be the one who gets that box bottom. And for card shop owners, they loved it because they were just going to throw it away anyway. And so if they could give you the box, then that saves them on having to dispose of it. And they know that it makes you a better customer. But not only that, it also gave them another special opportunity, which was to sell more packs. Because you could come in and you're hoping to get that box bottom, they'll go, well, it's got 4 packs in it. So if you buy the 4 packs, I can give it to you all in one. And as a kid, you're going, oh, that's a lot. Oh, fine, I'll do it. So it sold a lot of extra cards for card shop owners so they really loved it. Now, everything has a shelf life. And unfortunately, box bottoms had to run out of room. And that happened in early 1991. So when the baseball card season in 1991 came to a close, so too did box bottoms in a traditional sense. But they shifted from the baseball world, which was Topps and Fleer and Score and Don Russ. They'd been the ones doing it. Now, when the football release came out in 1991, it shifted over to Upper Deck, where they did a single card that was a really big card on the bottom. Only it wasn't a single card. There were 8 different ones, so they were collectible in a different way. And it changed the whole idea of what a box bottom could be and should be and how it would operate. And it opened a new door. Now, instead of trying to get the 4 different designs, or in the case of Score, I think in '88, I think they had 6 designs. So you have to get all 4 of those box bottoms. Here, now you got to get 8, which is even more. And the boxes are a lot more expensive. So collectors were able to now shift to a more grown-up approach to collecting box bottoms, and they weren't collectible in the same way, so they were both less appreciated and more impressive, all at the same time. Now, unfortunately, that only lasted for a little while, and Upper Deck continued in hockey to 1994 doing this. And then, but as Upper Deck was phasing out in the mid-1990s, Classic took over. Classic used it more as an advertising opportunity on the box, on the bottom of the box, to show off what the cards looked like. But still, the same idea was in place. Even though most of us weren't as young of kids, there was still that youthful excitement about getting it, coupled with the uniqueness of your card collection if you could get it. So it was an important part of our card collecting all the way through 1996, but then after that, we really didn't have much. So it was a window of time where this was really right. And I miss it. We've had a few examples in the years later. In fact, after box bottoms ended, we would have some other very interesting packaging techniques, whether it was soup cans or lunch boxes or a lot of other really cool stuff. But box bottoms was one of those, look, it's not that big of a deal, so why don't you do it kinds of things? And it worked for that particular time. All right. I'm not going to get into it anymore here. I'm going to leave that for the standalone video that I do later on. So instead, I want to move on and talk a little bit about the importance of Tiger Woods. Now, Tiger Woods is, I mean, when you talk about golf, Tiger Woods is the name, which is funny because in the mid-1990s, nobody knew who Tiger Woods was, even if we had seen him on The Tonight Show. We knew who Arnold Palmer was, who Jack Nicklaus was. We probably knew who Greg Norman was and Payne Stewart. We might know who Greg Kite was or Chichi Rodriguez, or there were a number of people who we might know, but there was no household name that overpowered the entire golf existence, or more importantly, resonated throughout sports. But in the late 1990s, that changed when Tiger Woods completely took over the sports world. And it was about the right time because Michael Jordan was retiring again for good. Sort of. Tiger Woods picked up the mantle. Gretzky was no longer the dominant name. Jordan was no longer the dominant name. And Joe Montana had retired, and we just didn't have big names to dominate sports. And Tiger Woods just kind of emerged, which was a gift, an absolute gift for golf, because now all of a sudden, golf was known mainstream. Everybody knew who Tiger Woods was. Even if they didn't care to watch golf, they knew exactly who he was. And there was an interest that came along with this that flooded onto courses all over the US, at least courses where Tiger Woods was playing. Where he wasn't playing, there wasn't a lot of change. But his star was so big that he forced the creation of golf cards in the early 2000s. Now, this wasn't brand new. Golf cards had actually been attempted a couple of times. Donruss in 1981 and 82, they made a run at golf cards, didn't go anywhere, so they didn't continue. Pro Set made a much better effort at it in 1990, 91, and 92. They probably would have done 93 as well if they hadn't, run out of room and fallen apart. So unfortunately, they weren't able to continue it, but neither of those two brands were able to crack the code of how to make a card set work. And Pro Set was tantalizingly close. I mean, they actually had some of the tools that they needed to pull it off. They just weren't brave enough to solve it. And that's what Upper Deck did in 2001, was they solved it. But they solved it because they needed to. They looked, and Tiger Woods was just worth so much, and nobody, and I mean nobody, was trying to capitalize on him in the sports card world. Upper Deck looked and said, this is a gold mine. We have to make it work. He was so influential on making on forcing Upper Deck to do this, not by his own efforts, but just by his presence, that Upper Deck literally found a way to encourage Beckett magazines to make magazines about golf for 6 months just to standardize it. And I feel sorry for Beckett because they got to figure out, okay, how in the world do we figure out the prices? What do we include? They had to start from scratch, which is pretty impressive, but it was necessary because the golf world was at its height to where there was a marketability for golf cards that wasn't going to come again. And for the most part, it really hasn't. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite dominant enough and broad enough to be able to hold up. Everybody wanted Tiger Woods, but did they want McCarron? Did they want Parnevik? Did they? Well, I mean, there are all of these Waldorf, so many names. People go, huh? Who's that? So the tools that it needed for Upper Deck's golf cards to be able to endure down the road were not quite in place. But it's fascinating to see how Upper Deck tried to make it work. Annika Sorenstam took over the women's golf world, and so they were trying to ride that wave as well. And they made a lot of great efforts. They really invested in it. And again, there was a lot of money, but these cards are easy to come by because there was just never a broad enough market that was able to form around it. But that's not an indictment of Tiger Woods, quite the opposite. There had been cases in the past of like soccer cards, and nobody could get soccer cards to work. Tennis, nobody even tried tennis in any meaningful effort. There were some Olympics cards, but those didn't have any legs. And there were a few IndyCar sets, but Indy cars just didn't quite resonate. F1 had almost nothing that really worked. So basically there was baseball, there's football, there's basketball, there's hockey, and there was NASCAR. That was pretty much it. So when Upper Deck went all in for 4 years making golf cards and really making golf cards, it showed just how important Tiger Woods was, that he was able to create a small industry. Even though it couldn't endure, it existed specifically because of him. All right. I'm going to call it quits there, and I'm going to just say that I talk more about it in the standalone video, so when that comes out, definitely check that out. I want to move on to the last two topics, and the first of those two topics that I'm going to talk about is the 1992-93 Upper Deck Shaq Exchange card. Now this is a fascinating card because prior to the 1992 basketball set, there was almost nothing in terms of exchange cards specifically. We had offers to buy card sets. Topps used to do that, and there was the Pro Set Platinum Paul Brown card. So there was that exchange card. But outside of that, the idea of having an exchange card where you have to send away to get a card was almost unheard of. So where this idea came from for Upper Deck, I really don't know. But when they created the idea, it opened a new door. And that door was because of the opportunity for sports card collectors to be able to engage with the card companies. There was always this wall of the retail space where the card companies and the collectors were on either side, and everything went through the retail space unless a card collector sent a card back to the manufacturer because it was defected or whatever. So there was a little bit of interaction, but very little at all. And so that meant that card collecting was built on a very simple model, which is you go to the retail outlet, you buy the stuff, and you go home. But what if you had the ability to do something direct to the company? And actually that existed a little bit. There were clubs. So like Stadium Club was built on the ability for collectors to be a part of the club and then buy stuff straight from Topps. That was the big selling point. I think it was the big selling point of Stadium Club's club. Pro Set had its Pro Set Gazette, so it had its own opportunities, and these things existed. But that was for people who had the time, dedication, and the money to sit down and do that. But for a common collector, we couldn't do that. So when the exchange card showed up for Shaq, it was equal parts amazing and frustrating. Amazing because now all of a sudden you have a different type of experience as a card collector. Man, you were all about that. The opportunity to do something different, do something new. Here's a card where in the card set, the first card's not even there. You got to send away to get it. But it's a free card. All you got to do is pay shipping and handling, which technically constitutes a free card. Unless you're in Canada, then you got to solve a math problem. I think it's a law about games where you can't, it's like you can't have a random contest. At any rate, it always sounded like an insult to Canada every time I read it. But that was the thing. It was different. It was special. It was rare. it was like it was hidden. But then at the same time, look, I bought the pack, I got a card number one, but it's not the card number one. Now I got to send it away. I got to wait for a while. I got to pay shipping and handling. I bought the pack. Why do I have to pay more? So thankfully, they only did it once, but it was such a novel opportunity that it, one, got conversations to happen. People were paying attention to this. They were better engaged, and that Upper Deck name became a lot stronger, even if it was the frustration. But look, Upper Deck was the rich kid who was crowding in on the sports card market anyway, so it's not like they had goodwill that they were losing necessarily. But yeah, it was fascinating, but it also opened a new door, because after this, exchange cards started to become common. Thankfully, we would rarely ever see a card missing from a card set that required an exchange card. Now, Score Pinnacle did do some with their parallels, but mostly it was with inserts, or even more impressive was when you would get an exchange card that you could send away to get a set. And this was great because as rookie cards were, for a lot of times, like with Fleer liked to be the first one on the shelf to get all of that early money of people who were just excited to buy sports cards. And in football, you could kind of thread the line, but in basketball, it was harder. It seems to be harder to get rookies into their insert sets. And so what they were able to do was to instead include an exchange card, so you could buy your cards really early, get that exchange card, send it in, and you get the rookies back that go along with the first series. Although ironically, by the time you got them, Series 2 was already out with the rookies. So it's not like you actually jumped the gun, but it felt that way. And it allowed manufacturers to be able to have a broader range of when they could make cards and still include rookies and give you that excitement. So it was a wonderful door that was opened from this. I'm going to talk more about that in a standalone video. There's standalone videos for all of these. So definitely look out for that. The last topic I wanted to talk about was the Upper Deck Heroes sets. And the Upper Deck Heroes sets was Upper Deck's first case of making actual insert sets. Now, there is an adjacent version, or not version, but an adjacent insert set that was kind of an insert set that was included in Upper Deck Hockey shortly after the first set. It was a couple of holograms that were really ambitious, but not very successful, but they were blank backed. So the first actual inserts that Upper Deck ever made were their Upper Deck Baseball Heroes, a set dedicated to Reggie Jackson. Now, this was a card set that was developed to solve a problem, one that I talk about in depth on the standalone video. So if you're curious about that, definitely check out the video. I'm not going to get into it here. I wanted to talk very briefly about it because, I really do get into it in that video. So the focus I want to talk about is how it opened up a new type of anticipation for sports cards, because they didn't just make a standalone insert set in 1990. In 1991, they, instead of making a standalone set, they made a subsequent set. So when the Nolan Ryan set came out in 1991, they were not cards 1 through 9, they were cards 10 through 18. That meant every release of Upper Deck added to this insert set. It grew over time, which meant you weren't just looking forward to the next cards in the set and eventually the next types of inserts, but you were also hoping to continue the card set you were already making. I don't know why this wasn't done more often. Like when Pro Line started doing this in 1992 with their basic set, I still think that's one of the greatest ideas ever made. And I don't know if I should attribute the Pro Line idea to what they were doing over here in Upper Deck, because they weren't just doing it with their Upper Deck Heroes sets, they were also doing it with their SP cards. So there was already a model in place by the time the Pro Line started to do their set. But still, the idea of every year extending something out is such a logical idea. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's not logical in the modern sports card world because we don't even have card numbers on cards that aren't in a main set. Inserts aren't built around that. But in that time, when we were still set collecting, the idea of building something, growing it over time, and the the commitment to sticking around year after year after year to make that set get longer is something that just didn't happen very often. I'm glad that Upper Deck started to do that, and in baseball at least, they continued that for not quite a decade, but for a long time. ProLine only did it for 3, or I guess I should say technically for 2 years, but it's a 3-year run. But we needed to have more of that kind of thing, because that kind of commitment over time, not only is it great for collectors, but it helps to give collectors who are on the fence about walking away a little bit of a carrot to stick around, because, well, you may as well at least finish that. There's certainly that feeling to it. Yeah, it's a wonderful story. It's a really wonderful thing that Upper Deck gave to us for that brief period of time. So I'm grateful for that, obviously. And do look at the actual video that's coming out in a couple of weeks to learn more about the story of this. And so, obviously for all 4 of these, I have standalone videos that are coming out. Now, if you are new to the channel and you haven't seen the stuff that I've done in the previous 15 chapters, which is quite a lot, definitely check those out. I've been talking about the history of sports cards this is my 4th year of doing that here on this channel. And I love looking at cards in a way that nobody else does. Or I shouldn't say nobody else does, as much as it is rare to hear these types of perspectives on sports cards be voiced. And I'm really glad that I'm able to provide this to you guys. And so definitely take advantage of the opportunity to learn more about the whole breadth of sports cards over time as I slowly unfurl this. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. And thank you very much for watching.